Moving on to chapter 7 of the phase, and this chapter is about maintaining. So you can also think about this as staying within the phase or dream experience that you are currently in and not waking up. And so he writes, beginning practitioners usually fear not being able to exit a phase. This should never be a concern. I'm surprised it says usually fear, because I would think this is probably more of a niche thing. I mean, I know this was never a concern for me personally. However, I do know some people already have the pre-established belief that, you could get stuck within the dream and never wake up. Although basically that is nothing you should ever worry about. Plus, if you want to know my go-to way to wake up out of any dream that I'm in, this even works for me when I'm dealing with sleep paralysis, is to close my dream eyes, shake my head back and forth really hard, and that's always broken through to my real head, and I'll wake up in bed shaking my head like that. Next up, the effectiveness of a phase experience is best measured not in time, but in the accomplishment of tasks on a previously determined plan of action, which is something I definitely need to be better at myself. I tend to just get lucid and then don't have a pre-established plan of action to try and execute, so I just go off and, fly around and have fun. He also recommends you don't need to have a huge list for this, like 1 or 2 tasks that you want to get done next time you're lucid within a dream or within this phase. That's plenty enough. And then after doing those 1 or 2 things, then you can go run off and fly around and explore the space and have fun. This one I disagree with. So it says, it's not rare for a half-hour phase adventure to turn out to have lasted less than 1 minute in real time. So from my personal experience, the time felt in dream compared to the amount of time that has really passed, as long as I'm lucid and actually aware of it as this is going on, tends to be pretty accurate. Like something I'll do a lot is if I wake up, midway through the night, I like to glance at the clock to see what time it is, and then I immediately try to fall back asleep. And so, a good amount of that time I'll fall back asleep, re-enter into the same dream or a very similar dream, but basically, not go back into stage 1 of sleep and have to go to 2 and then hit REM again. I'll just briefly wake up and then return straight back to REM. And a lot of times when I'm in that, so say I go back, I am lucid within this space, it feels like 5 or 10 minutes or so have passed, then the dream ends and I do wake up, I glance at the clock. Most of the time, I am pretty accurate with, how much time has passed. And I've never been so far off where it seemed like it was half an hour and it only turned out to be 1 minute. But, time definitely can, be a bit off within dreams. So I see where he's getting at. I just think that 1 minute in real time to 30 minutes of, phased experience time seems way off to me. What else we got? Resisting a return to the wakeful state is called a foul. Oh yeah, we can skip all that. All right, so next up we'll talk about techniques and rules against returning to the stencil body. So he just has a couple tips in here on how to kind of, maintain the dream and not wake up. So returning to the stencil body is basically just another way of thinking, you're in this OBE-like experience because you're experiencing yourself to be someplace else from where your real physical body is in bed. Like basically any dream you could think of as an OBE in some sense. So returning to the stencil body is just, waking back up. But anyway, the first one up is like constant sensory amplification. So this is basically like the palpation and peering techniques that we covered in the previous video, where you grab onto objects within the phase, you feel their textures, rotate them, peering at it, looking at it, trying to find all the intricate details of whatever it is you're holding, or anything else you see within the dream environment, which is similar to this whole peering thing, is similar to what I've made videos on in the past, and I called my active staring technique. You can also do this as needed, right? So instead of doing this kind of constantly throughout your whole phase experience, when you feel the dream starting to break down, that's when you can go ahead and do this sensory amplification stuff. Another tip here is constant vibrations. You do this by these are generated by a straining of the brain or tensing of the body without using muscles. So I guess that could potentially work. One I haven't messed around with too much. Diving head first, which is another technique that I covered in the previous post before this one, where he basically says, if you feel the dream breaking down, you can close your eyes and just dive head first or just belly flop into the ground, but trying to imagine yourself going deep, so going past the ground. Like you don't want to think you're going to do that and then just like kind of bounce off the ground within the dream. And he says that's a good way to kind of pop back up and then have the dream be more stable. One I haven't messed around with either, but that seems pretty similar to his next recommendation, which is rotation, which is one I have used before, and I have seen in a lot of other lucid dreaming books, where you can spin, and then as you spin, it has the properties of oftentimes stabilizing the dream. A lot of times for me, kind of like the diving head first one would be, is that when I do spin, because I kind of lose track of the visuals of what I'm seeing, it tends to kind of just like change the entire dream environment I'm in. So that's another one you could try. Counting, another interesting one I've never tried. or basically count to as large a number as possible, not just for the sake of counting, but with a strong desire to reach the highest number possible. Counting may be performed silently or aloud, and I guess that can work at stabilizing your dream. Maybe that's kind of like how meditating, if you're meditating and counting your breaths, that has a tendency to kind of stabilize the dream as well. So, perhaps that's kind of similar to that. Listening in, another one I haven't tried before. If there are any background sounds similar to those heard while entering the phase, so like rumbling, whistling, ringing, buzzing, or sizzling, these sounds may be used to prolong duration of the phase by aggressive attempts at listening in. So something I've done kind of similar to this is, instead of trying to find sounds that I heard as I was entering into the phase, because I typically do not enter through his whole indirect cycling techniques, listening in. I don't typically use that technique. But what can work for me is you just really listen into what's happening within the dream environment, kind of similar to just really paying attention to what's happening within the dream environment, period. But if you put more attention and focus onto that, that has the effect of oftentimes stabilizing the dream. Then he talks about maintaining using phase objects, which is again similar to one I covered in the previous video, where say if you have like some kind of totem, in your pocket that you can pull out, and this thing, you just put the intention to of having the properties of stabilizing the dream environment, that can work. He talks about here using a stabilizer watch style device in your pocket and using that. Another one, this one came from James Bray's book, The New Frontiers of Lucid Dreaming, where say like you could have like a pill in your pocket, expect it to be there, pull out some dream stabilization pill, take that, and that can work. And then the last one here, vocal maintaining. So basically sing or recite poetry as you're carrying out your plan of action. And he says that has the effect of stabilizing the dream as well. Again, another one that I haven't made use of personally, but it sounds interesting. And then next up, we'll be talking about techniques and rules for resisting falling asleep, and then techniques against false awakenings. But anyway, until then, that'll wrap it up. Keep the phase practice legit.